we've got a lot to talk about. Why don't you give us an update of where you are now that all the financial stuff has settled? You are now?
I am now, we had a private equity that came in 3 years ago.
Right.
Until that time, we grew completely independent. And, you know, I had that experience. So, and give me enough time to evaluate what I want to do, you know, what's important for me, what's important for Chobani. And I realized that staying independent was one of the biggest things for me.
Right.
And there was a lot of work to do still and a lot of opportunities. And some of the financial institutions are short-term, like short-term, 3, 4, 5 years. So how do we get time of long-term thinkers? So we exchanged it with an amazing organization, healthcare workers pension funds called HOOP from Canada. And we just finalized that about 2 months ago.
Right. So what prompted you to do it in the first place, the first investment? And talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so from the beginning, 2007 to end of 2013, we started from less than $1 million to made it about over $1 billion in sales in 5 years. We did everything independently within our cash flow with bank loans. We have never brought any investment from outside. At that point,
yogurt.
Yeah,
Yogurt.
we built one of the largest yogurt plants in the world in Idaho.
Right.
And we built it fast. And I was not ready, so we had some operational issues that required some, you know, cash to come in, and that's why we started the process. And it was quick, and it was my first time ever getting engaged with, you know, financial institutions. And some say we did okay, some say we didn't do all right, but there was a lot of learning in there. But the money was needed to build infrastructure.
To build the construction. Yeah. So what was the experience like? When did you realize it wasn't quite the thing for you?
Look, I'm a factory man. I'm in upstate New York. I'm an innovator. I take risks. I go out there, and just like every other entrepreneur that we talk about, my conscience was never about how much money I can make. And I never knew how to think that way. I think engaging in something like this, I realized that when you put the money in the center, and we are businesses, we all have to make money so we can invest or get return or whatever it is. But if it becomes like a core, it just doesn't match with Chobani.
Right.
We didn't build Chobani on that idea. We built Chobani on the idea of, can we make some changes on people's life? And while we're doing it, we use the vehicle as a business, not as an NGO, not any other way, because I thought that was the most effective way and most sustainable way. And we were one of the most profitable, fastest company, but we were always thinking about what kind of impact or what kind of innovation, how can we disrupt? And when that kind of stuff comes in, we didn't know what to do. It was an experience of 3 years of, how do I talk to these people? How do I talk to people in the company that way? And it was a battle. I would say it's like another good blood type match or something like this. It's extremely important that company and partners or whatever that comes in, it's aligned with, you know, the strategy and vision of the company. It wasn't a quite match.
So how did you talk to them over that 3 years? They were pushing for more growth or different things, or?
You know, growth is our part. Is like when you have a conversation of, I'm not saying we had this conversation, you know, very often, but you have a conversation of closing factory. I don't close factory, I build factories.
Right.
I mean, I built my company on closed factory as someone thinking that way. Someone from a high building said, you're closing that factory without even seeing it. I took that and I built the whole thing. I mean, I just can't go that way. I can't fire people. I can't, I just, you know, that's something that I am completely against. So there's a battle, there's a clash. But in the end, the financial institution has made an amazing return, and one of the best return that they ever made. Still, it could have been a lot more. But the focus being just a return, it just doesn't work with us.
All right, well, let's talk about that, building the kind of company you're trying to build. We'll get to the immigration issues soon, but when you're doing this, talk about the difficulties of doing that. There are some companies like Patagonia, there's some others that are in that zone, doing really well. doing really well, despite the fact that they are, like I was passing a Patagonia store in this neighborhood, very lovely. And there's giant posters on the front saying we'll be closed November 6th so all our employees can vote. Rose Mercado, who's the CEO, is very outspoken about suing the Trump administration, all kinds of different things. Talk about sort of building this value-driven company.
Yeah, it comes from my personal experience. I'm a farmer. Someone grew up in the eastern part of Turkey, sheep herding, farming, yogurt making, cheese making. I was far away from the world of business. In a way, in an emotional way, I really didn't like the people in business or CEOs because I thought, they're the one who's doing all the bad things and we're the one who's suffering. Coming US, being upstate, starting this whole thing, all my goal was, how do I not become someone I used to hate before, growing up? And is there a way that you can exercise all these business practices without being that? So I've never been an activist, even though I was very passionate about certain things. But I believe on doing things and let those things to speak by itself. We've been quiet for 6-7 years until this immigration and refugee issue came out. And we opened our doors and we said, come and look. We have 30% of our company's populations are immigrants and refugees. There's 19 different nationalities and 20 different languages spoken in our plants. These are all human beings who just want to do is build life. And it was a community work before it was anything else as an active opinion making in here. And that was an eye-opening for a lot of people, and people thought and that issue took us in so many different directions. Breitbart came out and said stuff, and others said some stuff. I got some bad letters and good letters and all that kind of stuff. But in the end, it's been 3, 4, 5 years of practice in our community in upstate New York and Idaho. And the experience speaks by itself on any political statement that you can make, that these are terrorists, or these are here to take your job, or these are here to destroy your community, or any of the communication you can make. I have live experience that I can show that these are all human beings that just want to do is they've gone through massive life experience, saved their lives, came here. All we have to do in a business is give them an opportunity and let them be part of the community.
That sounds easy, but we happen to be, I agree, that does sound easy, I accept. But we live in this country right now, right now, and that's not the case. And I'd like to sort of get more into what happened during that time and how you reacted to it. You were lucky enough to be attacked by Alex Jones, for example.
Lucky,
no, I'm teasing. He's a vile, horrible human being. He is. Let us be clear on that. Talk about that experience, the experience through it. So here you are doing something where you're trying to employ people, you bring them in. We are in a state of huge discord in this country about immigration, or allegedly in a state of huge discord, or at least being ginned up in that way. Talk about that experience.
I took it personally because it wasn't true. I don't decide who comes and settles in this country. The federal government does. We have very strict labor rules who works in the company, just like anybody else does. And some of the things we were saying was not true, and we offered the right information, and that continues. And a lot of response that came from the lawyers or the PR people who said, well, you don't touch this stuff like this, it just will die. I just said, no, it's just not fair. It's just not fair to me, it's not fair to the people of Twin Falls, it's just not fair to the people who's working in this plant. These are just good human beings and ordinary human beings. And we responded as a human way, just like anyone who would attack your daughter or son or your family, you nicely tell them to correct it.
Were you surprised by the initial reaction, or where did it come from your perspective?
Of our reaction?
No, of the reaction to your hire. Where did this start?
It was all the hype of election time, type of false information spreading everywhere. I mean, I think at that time, anybody you could go after, just make a story out of it. And because of my background, where I come from, and where the plants are, and what kind of people are working in the company, I guess it was an easy target. I'm very proud how we responded at that time. I think we were one of the only first ones. And we were very human about it at the same time. And that's what I say. We need CEOs and companies just to be combination of human. You know, we can't be just like these walls are speaking, or this, I don't know, this bureaucratic place speaking. Like, why can't we just react as a human being? It doesn't matter how large the company is. And we see more and more of that coming out. We see more and more of that response coming out. I mean, it's obvious in technology and all that stuff that the founders and people are very powerful voices when it comes to how the world should be shaped and how things should be. But in our space, in ordinary CPG and food, and it's kind of a little bit like behind the wall kind of talking. And I think more and more we behave this way as not right or wrong, but it's real. And it's a real human experience. I think the risks are a lot less in that way.
Were there repercussions and impact on your business?
No. I think people who don't like you, they don't like you. People who like you, they like you. I think what's appreciated in this country a lot is, I might not like your opinion, but I like how you behave. I think that's very, very real. I have presence in upstate New York, and I have presence in Idaho. You know, two different part of the country and two different type of views when it comes politically. What I have experienced in both places are people are good, they're hardworking, they care about their human, and all they have is different opinions.
You didn't experience sort of what happened with Nike. Were you surprised what happened? I mean, again, I don't even know to perceive if they're actually real protests or if it's just ginned up by social media.
Yes.
With the burning of the shoes and everything else. You didn't suffer any financial. Now, Nike now is trading at its highest multiple a week later. So it's mostly bullshit from what I can tell, the burning of the shoes. But were you worried about that affecting your bottom line? Did it affect your responses?
You'd be lying if you said I was not worried, because you know you have built factories and you have customers that are buying your products and love it, and those lines needs to run, and people needs to have a job, and you don't have unlimited resources like Nike and others. In our case, it's more difficult because we have less resources. Yes, worry was there, but you still do the right thing. You know, one thing at Chobani, I always encourage myself and everybody else at the company to do the right thing, even though it's the hardest thing to do. We learned that maybe that worry wasn't that real, but we had protests. We had boycott Chobani and all that kind of stuff did happen in a massive way. And I got some nasty letters that was concerning. But one of the best thing happened is I have received enormous amount of messages and letters that I've never seen anything like that in my life, that strangers from some other part of the country writes to you and tells you that's what this country is all about. I'm so glad you're doing this, and we're 100% behind you. So there is that, and there is that.
Right. So do you expect to be attacked again, or do you feel that this is over, that this particular?
I am really pleased that conversations are happening on the people level, not on the political level, on the people level when it comes to the issue of immigration, gender, inequality, and refugees and all that stuff. We have so much long way to do. For me, what matters the most is the political climate really changes here and there. That's normal. But how do we get businesses involved? How do we get people involved in topics like this? But even when the climate of the politics changes, certain things do not change.
Right.
And I've said it a million times. I'm from a different part of the world. I arrived here as a student. I put my capability into work because this land gave me an opportunity to be able to do it. And I keep saying is, yes, maybe roads are not great, maybe airports can be fixed, or maybe buildings can be fixed, but one of the most amazing things in this country, I call it magic, is that when you are here, you feel like you can do it. And it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what kind of background you are, and maybe it's not perfect, but it's better than anywhere else around the earth. And this cannot be built by money, this cannot be built by political system, it's just somehow it's here. Maybe it belongs to the history of this country. And damaging that would be the worst thing anyone can do for their children.
Right.
Yes, it needs fixing. I am not happy what's happening in rural America today. It's not. I mean, we are disconnected. I know we're talking about how we build features, how we go to places faster, how we get connected better, how we pay better, all that kind of stuff. But some of the fundamentals are missing on the greater population that we cannot be disconnected.
Mm-hmm. How do you solve that? Because this
Businesses. I always say every trouble I see in the world, I try to solve it with Chobani on my own background. Mm-hmm. I think income inequality, one of the biggest things that we're facing today.
Right.
You go to an upstate New York and some rural areas, and you see how people live. This cannot go like this. And the government can only do so much, but as businesses, we can do. We can make the calculation and say, $7, $8 an hour times 40 times 2 people, even if they work 60 hours, and 2 children, and a house, and a car, the math doesn't make any sense. What are we going to do?
Right.
In retirement, what are we going to do? What's the fair way of getting people involved in the company that you built together, the shares and all that kind of stuff? We as a businesses, we have responsibility to change that for them in the community that we work for.
Do you imagine it shifting? Because I don't think it is. It doesn't seem like it. The resistance remains to working wages, the income inequality continues, the tax system is oriented toward that with the hope that it'll trickle down.
Yeah.
You say businesses are the solution, why don't more businesses do that then?
Okay, so the main thing the business will do is make profit for the shareholder.
Right.
And that narrative needs to change.
Right.
That narrative change is, return for shareholder and return for community and return for the stakeholder in the company. That thinking needs to change. So we need a new way of CEOs coming up here in this field, mm-hmm. especially on manufacturing, especially on the companies that hundreds of thousands of people that work in there. So that's boardroom, that's the CEO, and the consumer demands that too, right? If you make one of the biggest studies that is done, we did it for Tent, but it came out later, is what people think of the company is how you care about their workers' well-being and the community is extremely important. So as a consumer, we have to make those choices, who we pick, and based on the company's behavior.
Is that why do you imagine going public now, or?
I'm not against it. It just has to be a reason for it.
I'm very enthusiastic. I'm not against it.
But it has to be a reason for it. We are in a place.
But this gives you, the way you have it gives you a lot of flexibility to do things like this. If you're a public company, you don't have that.
I think I would.
Yeah?
I think I would be. People don't realize is this is a part of a culture that is built from the beginning, that acting like this does not make you disadvantaged on the gain on the business. Mm-hmm. I'm probably the fastest growing in this field, and I have been in for 6-7 years. We innovate more than anybody else. Our cost is a lot less than anybody else. I have 2,000 people partnered in the company, mm-hmm. but in a way of, as a business, I feel like I have a rocket engine mm-hmm. on top of everything else. So it does have a massive amount of business advantages by acting this way.
Right.
The only difference is you have to mean it. It has to be part of your culture. It has to be part of your DNA.
From the beginning.
From the beginning.
So do you imagine you'll go public, or do you not?
I do sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Because and when I read, Elon Musk and all that kind of stuff, I sometimes say maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Yeah, definitely not.
There's a lot of reasons, but I do like that as a tool. If I can take Chobani to where it is, to expand this way and that way, and if that's going to give me a tool to be able to do it, I will definitely do it.
So let's talk about yogurt innovation right now. Where are you in that cycle? You are growing like crazy, but you've got 1 million competitors. You've got to deal with channels that are changing massively. Talk first about the channels, like where you distribute it. Chobani. Do you have to sell directly to customers? Do you feel like you have to do that, or because channels are changing, right? You're mostly supermarkets.
Yeah. I mean, right now we are we are in Amazon, of course, in Fresh Directs and all that places,
Right.
but vast majority of our business is in, you go to store and you purchase it on the store. There is a lot of changes are happening, how consumers are getting their food and groceries and their needs. Food is little, especially perishable food is little different. So the delivery systems are not as, cost effective and as, good type of delivery is not there yet, and people are trying to solve that problem. There's a human behavior where we want to go and look at the food and touch the food and being able to go to store, and that's the human element. But I see two things are happening. One is all these technological advantages where things are getting easier in the store, or things are getting easier for the payments, or all that traceability, all that kind of stuff. Technology will be amazing advantage for this. And I also see going backward, where we get the food from the communities that we know who's making it, and the status of that food, that how it is, and comes as fresh as possible and without less ingredients. And I see that two things are going to as getting closer and closer.
So how so?
I always miss my milkman coming in and bringing my bread and my
Why don't you
my
be a
milk, my
milkman?
cheese. So, what's imagining of milkman coming back in different ways, and 10 years from now in a different way? So that how is that comes to your door? What you want in a form of what you
Could you do something like that? Could Chobani?
Well, we could do anything like that, yeah.
Are you considering doing things like that in order to have a direct relationship with consumers?
Yeah, we pay a lot of attention to have that relationship. The delivery system, do we do it ourselves? Do we partner with someone who's doing this amazingly already? But I'm a big fan of direct to consumer. As long as the quality food stays the same and the cost doesn't go up. Because for me, is one of the biggest things is how do I get quality food, best food, accessible for ordinary people? And some of these elements do add cost to it.
And how do you look at your relationships with Amazon versus supermarkets versus other distributions?
Again, I buy from Amazon or Walmart.com or Costco.com a lot of stuff for my home. But when it comes to food, I go to my store. As Amazon is going amazingly popular and going crazy on one side, but the store traffic on Costco is also going out of control these days, right? There is a lot of mixed messages are coming from different directions. Whatever the platform the consumer is going to want, I'm not going to invent the platform. I'm just going to exist on the platform that exists. Instacart is doing things, and so many stuff is going on. We are going to be available whatever the platform the consumer wants us to be, and being out there.
But you want some control of that platform.
The control is the brand and the consumer. I think what we are going into an era of brand powers, where the brand and the consumer are connected some way or another. And the delivery system, either you own it or somebody else own it, or you stay in somebody else's platform. But we're coming into an era of brand, like true brand relationship with the end users.
That they like Chobani yogurt over blank, over...
Yeah, and when you have that relationship built, you know that this is your trusted, liked supplier of the good food, and I will have that, but either me or that will choose what either I go to store or it's delivered to me, or
The point I want to get to is you think you have to have more control over that relationship going forward.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right,
100%.
Questions from the audience? Questions? Please? I have more? No questions? All right. Where do you, when you look at sort of the broader supermarket world, who do you think the big players are going to be coming forward?
On the supermarkets?
Yeah.
I think the supermarkets are going to change.
How so?
It's going to get smaller, a lot smaller. The varieties availability is going to get a lot less. So the supermarkets are going to choose 1 or 2 brands. They're not going to have 10 brands. And then the people are going to give up on certain items because they know it's going to come online. You don't have to be in the store for getting a toilet paper, for example,
right.
or whatever. So the footprints are going to come, closer. And it's a race. Who knows who's going to win this race? And we're watching everyone closely. I'm amazed how Costco is doing things. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching Walmart, what they're doing between the e-commerce and their actual stores are going on. The most important thing is stay calm, have a longer vision, and understand where this world is going and react instead of quarterly, long-term vision type of investment on the CPG world. The problem is on the world of food or the packaged food is the startups to become a main player is extremely difficult.
Right. How did they break in then?
I mean, I lived for the 10 years. For me to build this, it took me 20 years from going from a startup to be able to be competing with some major brands out there. Mm-hmm. It's not like a technology you can have them made it somewhere else, or you can live in, in cloud. Or you actually have to build factories, you have to build line, you have to hire salespeople, you have to build, infrastructures. And it's extremely difficult to be able to build this. So what happens is all these little brands, or good brands, as they grow because of their financial structure with the PE firms or whatever it is, 99% of them becomes part of the large organizations.
Right.
And once it becomes a large of organizations, they just basically the end of their promise.
Right.
So this cycle never been broken on the large scale. In the small scale, it's always there. You can go to Whole Foods or you can go to some cool stores. Right. You can find everything you want in a price that doesn't matter to you. But in order to make a cup of yogurt that a teacher in upstate New York can buy, or firefighter in Idaho can buy, and still have all the right organization, still have the brand that promises for the future, and still acts in a certain way in operating the business. And I have an incubator, I was just talking about that yesterday, is that there are a few things that are extremely important, but your partners, your financial partners, are extremely important on this, to be able to make these long-term bets and focus on it and stay on it. And so hopefully you can change the landscape of the food quality and ingredients and what it means to the environment, what it means to society, that kind of standings. That's a circle that we have to break. I find that to be most challenging than how that food goes into whose home or whatever.
Would you ever consider selling out to a large, all of them do?
No.
You're it, you're the one that
I've said it no from day one. The reason I had so much pain is because I choose the difficult way. The easy way is sell, you take money, you go sailing. The most difficult way is you stay, try to compete with the guy who's going to say, hey, you either sell to me or I'm going to make the same thing and I have billions. Yeah. And so that's a difficult way. Yeah. And thank God I stayed that way. Now I feel like Chobani's people and the way that does business has proven something. And how do I spread this to more?
It could prove that you're just crazy, right?
That's true.
That's true. Last question. What is the trend in yogurt? I'm just curious. Like, I go to my yogurt aisle and I'm utterly confused by the situation there. There's goat yogurt, there's soy yogurt, there's cashew yogurt. It's not settling down.
It's a little bit. I think the plant-based is real.
Yeah.
On the milk,
are you making a plant-based?
On the milk alternatives. We'll talk about the next time if you invite me here.
Okay,
but
so yes.
I respect what's happening on the plant-based products. I really do. I just want people to understand what they're replacing with what. Mm-hmm. And if you don't understand that, then while you're making your choices of avoiding certain things, you might be getting something that you might not like. For me, yogurt is one of the finest food ever. I grew up with yogurt, and my son is 5 months old. The first food he had was a cup of Chobani, of course.
Of course.
A few things.
I mean, like, really.
But the nutrition of it is, how do I keep it plain without any antibiotics or hormones and all that kind of stuff? How do I populate it with a lot of cultures and probiotics? And how do I make sure that the fat and the protein balance is in there? So for me, it's the best combination of yogurt, live and active cultures, loaded with probiotics, and of course mild in texture is good, and if you want it with fruit or flavors.
It's hard to do that with a piece of cashew, right? Is that what you're saying?
Very difficult.
All right, on that note, Mr. Chobani, thank you.